The rumble of Harley engines echoed through the quiet streets of Asheville, North Carolina, every Saturday morning like clockwork. Jake Thunder Morrison had been leading the Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club for 15 years, his leather vest adorned with patches that told stories of brotherhood, loyalty, and a life lived on two wheels. But nothing in those years on the road had prepared him for the silence that filled his home. His twin daughters, Emma and Lily, were born on a stormy April night 7 years ago. The doctors had gathered around his wife Sarah with concern etched on their faces, whispering words like neurological condition and congenital mutism. The girls were healthy in every other way, beautiful with their mother's green eyes and his own wild blonde hair, but they had never spoken a single word. Not mama, not dada, not even a cry when they were hungry or hurt. Sarah had left 3 years ago. She couldn't handle it, she said. The constant doctor appointments, the speech therapists who made no progress, the stares from other parents at the playground, the weight of wondering if her daughters would ever tell her they loved her. Jake came home one day to find a note on the kitchen table and an empty closet. He never blamed her, not really. Some people were built for storms and some weren't. He was built for storms. The house on Maple Street was modest. A 2-story craftsman with a wraparound porch where the girls would sit for hours, watching the world go by. They communicated through sign language, through drawings, through the kind of twin telepathy that amazed even the specialists. Emma was the bolder one, always ready to climb trees and ride on the back of her father's motorcycle. Lily was gentler, spending her afternoons in the garden, tending to the tomatoes and sunflowers with a patience that belied her age. Jake worked at Morrison's Auto Repair, the shop his grandfather had opened in 1952. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills and allowed him to pick the girls up from Riverside Elementary every day at 3:15. The other mechanics, Rusty and Pete, had become unofficial uncles to Emma and Lily, teaching them how to change oil and fix carburetors with hand signals and demonstrations. On this particular October morning, Jake was making pancakes in the kitchen, flour dusting his tattooed forearms as Emma and Lily sat at the table coloring. The smell of maple syrup filled the air, mixing with the scent of coffee brewing in the old percolator. Through the window, he could see Mrs. Chun from next door hanging laundry, and the Martinez kids riding their bikes down the sidewalk. Life had found a rhythm, a comfortable pattern of morning routines, school days, and evening dinners. The girls attended a special education program that focused on nonverbal communication. Their teacher, Miss Rebecca, sent home progress reports that always said the same thing. Bright, engaged, creative, but no breakthroughs in verbal communication. Jake had stopped hoping for miracles years ago. He had learned to read every expression on his daughters' faces, to understand the difference between their happy signs and their frustrated ones, to know when Emma's furrowed brow meant she was worried about a math test, and when Lily's withdrawn posture meant someone had been unkind to her at school. The Iron Wolves had become family too. Every Sunday, the club would gather at Jake's house for a barbecue. Big Mike would bring his famous ribs, Tommy would set up the cornhole boards, and Sarah Jean, the only female member, would braid the girls' hair and teach them card tricks. The bikers treated Emma and Lily like princesses, never showing pity, only love. But there were hard moments too. Parent-teacher conferences where Jake sat alone while other couples discussed their children's achievements. Birthday parties where the girls couldn't sing along. School plays where they stood silently in the back row, their parts acted out in gestures while other children delivered lines. Jake smiled through all of it, his heart breaking in private, late at night when the girls were asleep and the house was quiet except for the sound of his own breathing. He had tried everything over the years. Traditional speech therapy, experimental treatments, even a trip to a specialist in Boston who had written papers on selective mutism. Nothing worked. The girls' vocal cords were fine, their hearing perfect, their cognitive development normal. It was as if their voices were locked behind a door that no one could find the key to open. As Jake flipped the last pancake onto a plate, Emma tugged at his sleeve. She pointed out the window to where a thin figure was rummaging through the trash cans at the end of the driveway. A boy, maybe 9 or 10 years old, wearing clothes that were too big and shoes that were falling apart. Jake's jaw tightened. He had seen homeless kids before in downtown Asheville, but never in this neighborhood. Jake wiped his hands on a dish towel and walked to the front door. The October morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke from someone's chimney. The boy at the trash can froze when he heard the screen door creak open, his dark eyes wide with fear, ready to run. "Hold on there," Jake called out, raising his hand in a peaceful gesture. "You hungry?" The boy didn't answer, just stared at Jake with the kind of wariness that comes from too many bad experiences with adults. He was small for his age, Hispanic maybe, with matted black hair and dirt smudged across his cheeks. His jacket was torn at the shoulder, and Jake could see bruises on his wrists. "Come on inside. I've got pancakes. More than we can eat." The boy hesitated, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Jake could see the hunger winning the internal battle. Slowly, the kid walked up the driveway, keeping his distance, ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. Inside, Emma and Lily watched from the kitchen doorway as their father led the stranger in. Jake pulled out a chair and gestured for the boy to sit. He placed a plate stacked high with pancakes in front of him, along with butter and syrup. The boy attacked the food like he hadn't eaten in days, which he probably hadn't. "What's your name?" Jake asked, pouring a glass of orange juice. The boy looked up, syrup on his chin, and something shifted in his expression. He glanced at Emma and Lily, then back at Jake, and instead of speaking, he made a series of hand gestures. Jake's eyebrows rose. "You know sign language?" The boy nodded, continuing to sign as he ate. His name was Carlos. He had been living on the streets for 2 weeks since running away from his foster home. The man there had been cruel, locking him in closets, withholding food as punishment. Carlos had finally escaped through a window one night and had been surviving on his own ever since. Emma and Lily moved closer, their eyes locked on Carlos as he signed. They had never met another child who communicated the way they did. Emma signed a question. "Where are your parents?" Carlos's hands stilled. He looked down at his plate, and when he looked back up, there were tears in his eyes. His mother had died 2 years ago from cancer. His father, he didn't know. The state had placed him in foster care, moving him from home to home, each one worse than the last. Jake felt his chest tighten. He knew he should call social services, do the right thing by the system. But he had seen what the system did to kids like Carlos. He had been in foster care himself as a teenager after his own father had gone to prison. He remembered the cold institutional feel, the rotating cast of adults who didn't care, the loneliness that ate at you from the inside. The girls were signing rapidly with Carlos now, a conversation flowing between the three of them in complete silence. Jake watched the 3 children communicate, something stirring in his chest he hadn't felt in years. Hope, maybe, or recognition. Carlos wasn't just another homeless kid. He was a mirror of what Jake had once been, lost and alone, desperately needing someone to see him as more than a problem to be solved. "You can stay here today," Jake said, signing as he spoke so Carlos would understand. "Clean up, rest. We'll figure things out." Carlos's eyes widened with disbelief. "Really? Really?" After breakfast, Jake showed Carlos to the bathroom upstairs. He laid out fresh towels and found some of his old clothes that might fit the boy. While Carlos showered, Jake sat on the porch steps, his phone in his hand, staring at the number for Child Protective Services. His thumb hovered over the call button, but he couldn't bring himself to press it. Emma appeared beside him, tugging on his sleeve. She signed a single word, "Stay." Jake looked at his daughter, at the pleading in her green eyes. In 7 years, he had learned to read every nuance of her expressions, and what he saw now was something new. Connection. For the first time, his daughters had met someone who understood their silence not as a disability, but as a different way of being. "I don't know, baby girl. It's complicated." Lily joined them, sitting on Jake's other side. She pulled out her small notebook, the one she always carried, and wrote in careful letters. "He's like us. He needs us." Jake ran his hand through his hair, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He thought about Sarah, about how she had crumbled under the pressure of raising children who were different. He thought about the Iron Wolves, about Big Mike who always said family wasn't about blood, it was about who showed up. He thought about his own childhood, about the man who had finally taken him in when he was 16, taught him how to fix motorcycles, and gave him a reason to believe the world could be kind. If you're sitting there wondering what happens next, if you're rooting for these kids the way I'm rooting for them, take a moment and subscribe to the channel. Because this story, this moment right here, it's just the beginning of something none of them saw coming. When Carlos came downstairs wearing clean clothes, his hair still damp, he looked younger somehow. Vulnerable. He signed to Jake. "Thank you. I'll leave tomorrow. I don't want to cause trouble." Jake stood up, his decision made. "You're not going anywhere yet. Not until we figure out what's right. And maybe, just maybe, what's right is you staying here for a while." Carlos's face crumpled, and for the first time since arriving, he let himself cry. Emma and Lily rushed to him, wrapping their small arms around him in a fierce hug. 3 children who the world had labeled as broken, holding each other up. The next 3 weeks changed everything in the Morrison household. Jake made calls, navigated the bureaucratic maze of temporary foster care applications, and pulled every string he had with the Iron Wolves. Big Mike knew a lawyer who owed him a favor. Sarah Jean had connections at the county courthouse. Slowly, painfully, the paperwork began to move forward. Carlos could stay, at least for now. The boy fit into their lives like he had always been there. He shared a room with the girls, sleeping on an air mattress that Jake set up between their beds. Every morning, the 3 of them would wake up signing to each other, planning their day in silent collaboration. Carlos taught them signs he had learned in his various foster homes, expanding their vocabulary. They taught him their own invented gestures, the private language twins develop. School was harder. Jake enrolled Carlos at Riverside Elementary, in the same special education program as Emma and Lily. The other kids were curious about the new boy who didn't speak, who stuck close to the Morrison twins like they were his lifeline. Some were kind, others weren't. On a gray November afternoon, Jake got a call from Miss Rebecca. There had been an incident on the playground. 3 boys from the regular classes had cornered Carlos, Emma, and Lily by the swing sets, mocking their hand gestures, calling them freaks and dummies. Carlos had shoved one of the boys who had grabbed Lily's notebook and thrown it in the mud. Jake arrived at the school within 10 minutes, his heart pounding. He found all 3 children sitting outside the principal's office, Carlos with a split lip, Emma with tears streaming down her face, and Lily clutching her ruined notebook to her chest. Principal Henderson was a tired woman in her 50s who had seen every kind of schoolyard drama. She explained the situation clinically, without emotion. The other boys claimed Carlos had started it. Their parents were threatening to press charges for assault. She recommended a 3-day suspension for Carlos. Jake felt the old anger rising, the kind that had gotten him into trouble as a young man. He took a deep breath, forcing it down. "These are good kids," he said quietly. "They were defending themselves. Mr. Morrison, I understand, but we have rules." "Then your rules are protecting bullies." He took the children home, his jaw clenched tight. That evening, the Iron Wolves gathered at the house without being called, the way family does when they sense trouble. They sat around the kitchen table while Jake told them what had happened, Carlos icing his lip, the girls pressed close to his sides. Big Mike leaned back in his chair, his massive arms crossed. "Those parents want to press charges? Let them try. We'll make sure every parent in that school knows their precious angels were ganging up on 3 kids who can't even call for help." Tommy nodded. "We protect our own." Carlos looked around the table at these rough, tattooed men and women who had claimed him as family, and something shifted in his expression. The next morning, Carlos woke before dawn. He lay on his air mattress, listening to Emma and Lily breathing softly in their beds, and felt something he hadn't felt in 2 years. Safe. Loved. Home. He reached into his backpack, the one possession he had carried through every foster home, every night on the streets. His fingers found the small leather pouch at the bottom, wrapped in an old t-shirt. He pulled it out carefully, holding it in the dim light filtering through the curtains. Inside was a harmonica, silver and worn smooth from years of handling. His mother had given it to him on his 7th birthday, 3 months before the cancer diagnosis. She had been a music teacher before she got sick, filling their tiny apartment with piano melodies and songs in Spanish. The harmonica was the last gift she ever gave him, the last piece of her he had left. Carlos sat up, cross-legged on the mattress. He hadn't played it since she died. Every time he tried, the grief choked him, made his chest feel like it was caving in. But now, in this house with this family who had chosen him, he felt her memory differently. Not as a wound, but as a warmth. He brought the harmonica to his lips and blew softly, testing the notes. The sound was quiet, barely a whisper, but in the silent house it carried. He played a simple melody, one his mother had taught him, a lullaby she used to sing. Emma stirred first, sitting up in bed. Then Lily. They watched Carlos play, his eyes closed, his small body swaying slightly with the music. The melody was sad and sweet, full of longing and love, and something about it reached into a place inside them that had been locked away. Jake appeared in the doorway, drawn by the sound. He leaned against the frame, his throat tight, watching this boy pour his heart out through a battered harmonica at 5 a.m. Then something impossible happened. Lily's lips parted, and a sound came out. Not words, not yet, just a hum. Soft and uncertain, but unmistakably there. She was matching the melody Carlos played, her voice finding the notes like a key finding a lock. Emma gasped, and then she was humming too, her voice joining her sister's in tentative harmony. Carlos's eyes flew open. His hands trembled, but he kept playing, tears streaming down his face. Jake stood frozen, unable to breathe, unable to move, watching his daughters make sounds he had waited 7 years to hear. The humming grew stronger, more confident. The girls looked at each other, wonder and shock written across their faces. Lily reached for Emma's hand, and they hummed together, their voices blending with the harmonica in a moment that felt like magic, like grace, like everything impossible becoming possible. When the song ended, silence fell over the room. But it was a different silence now. Not empty, but full. Full of potential, full of breakthrough, full of the sound of locked doors finally opening. Jake's voice cracked when he spoke. Again. Play it again. 2 years later, the Morrison house on Maple Street had become something of a legend in Asheville. The biker with the 3 singing kids, people called them. Not quite accurate, but close enough. Emma and Lily never became chatterboxes. Their voices came slowly, carefully, like flowers blooming after a long winter. Single words at first, then short phrases, always accompanied by their hands signing in parallel. The doctors called it remarkable, unprecedented even. They wrote papers about it, theorized about trauma and neural pathways and the power of music therapy. But Jake knew the truth. It wasn't science that had unlocked his daughters' voices. It was love. It was a homeless boy with a harmonica and a heart big enough to share his grief and his gift. Carlos was legally Jake's son now. The adoption finalized on a sunny April morning with the entire Iron Wolves crew in the courthouse, their leather and tattoos making the judge smile despite herself. He still played the harmonica every morning, and the girls still hummed along, their routine as sacred as prayer. They had started a music program at Riverside Elementary, funded by donations from the motorcycle club and local businesses. Children who struggled with communication, who felt different or broken, gathered twice a week to make music together. Carlos led the harmonica section. Emma played drums with a ferocity that made her father proud. Lily had discovered she loved the guitar, her gentle fingers coaxing melodies that made grown men cry. Miss Rebecca often said that her classroom had become the heart of the school, a place where being different was celebrated, where silence and sound existed together in harmony. On this particular Saturday morning, Jake stood on his porch watching his 3 children load instruments into the sidecar of his Harley. They were playing at the Asheville Street Festival, a performance the whole town had been talking about for weeks. Emma wore a leather vest that matched her father's. Emma and Lily in dresses Sarah Jean had helped them pick out, all of them grinning with the kind of joy that comes from knowing exactly where you belong. Big Mike pulled up on his bike, followed by Tommy and Sarah Jean and the rest of the crew. They were the kids' backup band now, middle-aged bikers who had learned to play music so 3 children could shine. As they rumbled down Maple Street toward downtown, neighbors waved from their porches. Mrs. Chun blew kisses. The Martinez kids chased after them on their bicycles, cheering. Jake looked in his mirror at Carlos sitting behind him, harmonica in his pocket, and thought about that October morning 2 years ago, about trash cans and pancakes and a decision that had changed all of their lives. Some people would call it fate. Others would call it chance. Jake called it family. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this journey. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button, drop a comment telling us what you felt, and subscribe to the channel. We share stories like this every week, stories about hope, about second chances, about the families we choose. Tell us in the comments what story you want to hear next. We're listening just like Jake learned to listen with our whole hearts.